It started on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic one. Just plain old, mid-week, office lunch leftovers Tuesday. I was wrapping up a tedious licensing call when my assistant buzzed me. Call online too. Bank manager. Says it's urgent, I sighed. Tell them I'll call back. But the message came through again, this time with a name attached. It's Ezra Beaumont, from Capital One Wealth. Something about that name pulled at my gut. I picked up, this is Isla Langston. His voice was careful, measured, like he was about to hand me a grenade. Miss Langston, I'm sorry to bother you, but we have a discrepancy with a mortgage application, your co-signed property at 227 Belrose Lane. I blinked. My what now? The mortgage, he repeated. For the property co-owned with a Miss Freya Langston? My stomach dropped. Freya, my younger sister. I didn't co-sign anything, I said. Well, Ezra hesitated. Our system has your digital signature and SSN on file. The application was processed 6 months ago. 6 months ago. I barely heard the rest. Just static and a vague memory of my mom handing me a tablet at Christmas. Sign this, sweetie. It's for Grandma's estate taxes. It wasn't. I was shaking when I ended the call. A noise escaped me, half laugh, half scream. Freya, my parents. They forged my name. 12 years of busting my ass as a corporate compliance attorney gone. Risked by the people who raised me. I grabbed my phone and hit call. Ronan, I said when my best friend answered. I think my family committed fraud in my name. His pause was short but meaningful. I'll be there in 15. Ronan was already skimming through the emailed mortgage packet when I launched into pacing mode. He held up a printed page. This isn't your signature. It's not even close. Look here, this loop on the I. Your mom does that. You don't. I sat down hard. My own mother copied my handwriting. He nodded grimly. And badly. My phone lit up. It's her, I said, showing him the screen. Answer it. Let's hear the damage control. I took a deep breath. Hi, Mom. Her voice was sugar. Hi, honey. You coming to Freya's birthday dinner tonight? Your dad made that pecan salmon you love. I nearly dropped the phone. Funny you called, I said coldly. I just got off the phone with a bank. Apparently, I co-signed Freya's mortgage? Silence. Then, oh Isla, we were gonna tell you. Tell me what? I snapped. That you used my identity without my consent? That you tied me to a $450,000 mortgage I knew nothing about? It's not like that, she said, defensive now. Freya needed help. You're doing so well. The bank wouldn't approve her otherwise. So you forged my signature, I said, voice hollow. Don't be dramatic, sweetheart. I hung up. Ronan was already opening a document on his laptop. You're going to want to sit for this. Another credit card. Another account I didn't open. Addressed to my parents' house. Luxury shopping. Spa trips. $2,000 at a champagne lounge in Manhattan. Ronan kept going. They've been busy. Here's a store card opened in your name. And this, he clicked. Is your investment portfolio being listed as collateral? I felt sick. They're leveraging my accounts to prop up Freya's finances? Looks like it, but it's worse. Ronan scrolled again. Someone backdated these forms to show you were present at meetings you weren't at. I cross-checked your court docket. You were representing a merger in D.C. the week of this signature. I didn't even know what to feel. Rage? Grief? Disgust? All I knew was I wasn't letting this go. The night of Freya's birthday, I walked into my parents' house like a soldier entering enemy territory. My mother smiled like everything was fine. My father offered me a glass of wine. And Freya, she looked nervous. Good, she should be. I placed a thick envelope on the dinner table. What's that? Freya asked, already pale. Evidence, I said, of everything. Every account opened in my name. Every forged signature. Every lie. Dad bristled. Don't take that tone with us. You forged my identity, I said flatly. You committed fraud. You gambled with my future, my license, my reputation. Freya's eyes filled with tears. I just needed help. It was supposed to be temporary. I pulled out a page. Was this $9,000 shopping spree temporary? How about the cruise to Monaco? Or the spa membership that cost more than my rent? Mom moved toward me, hands up. Isla, please, this is a family matter. No, I said. This is a legal matter. And for the first time in years, they looked afraid of me. Good. They should be. After the dinner disaster, I couldn't sleep. Not because of what was said, but what wasn't. Not once did they apologize. Not once did anyone say, "We were wrong." It was all just rationalization wrapped in guilt tripping. The next morning, I walked into Ronan's office like a storm. His head popped up from behind a stack of files. "You look like someone who didn't sleep and needs to commit arson." "I want blood," I said. "But let's start with bank statements." He handed me a coffee. Good, because I pulled everything. The files were worse than expected. 6 credit cards, 3 personal loans, 1 home equity line of credit tied to my retirement account. I leaned against his desk. "How much total debt?" "Just shy of $312,000. I stared at him. I didn't even know it was possible to sink that deep without alerting the FBI, actually, he said. "We may want to talk to them soon." He pushed a printout toward me. "Here's the kicker. Some of these loans list a projected income, double what you currently earn." I frowned. "That's not public info. Your dad's friend Wendell Grant? He's on the board at your firm." I froze. "He gave them access to internal projections, including your pending partner bonus," Ronan continued. "They used it to inflate your profile, made you look like a prime lending candidate, so they used confidential intel to boost a lie." Exactly. And just like that, my career, my spotless, law-bound career, was tangled in a web of fraud I didn't weave. I called Ezra, the bank manager. He picked up immediately. "Miss Langston, thank you for calling back. Ezra, I need everything. Originals, digital footprints, login attempts, timestamps, IP addresses. If someone accessed those documents pretending to be me, I want to know exactly how they did it." He hesitated. "We've started reviewing activity logs. I'll send over everything we find." "And Ezra?" "I believe there's more. I think they've been using me as a financial front for years." He went quiet. "Then we'll dig deeper." After I hung up, Ronan gave me a look. "You ready to go nuclear?" I nodded. "I want to see it all burn." We set up shop in his apartment walls covered with sticky notes, flowcharts, spreadsheets. Ronan's cat sat on the printer like an emotional support animal for corporate trauma. Every time we uncovered something, I felt another memory fracture. That gift Dad gave me when I graduated law school, turns out it was a credit card in my name he'd been using for business dinners. That account he opened to help me invest? A shell he used to funnel loan money. It wasn't just deception, it was a pattern. Years of small betrayals stitched together into a net. I never saw tightening. The worst was still coming. "Hey," Ronan said one night, eyes fixed on his screen, "you might want to see this." He pulled up a job application. Someone applied for a legal analyst position at Crowley & Dorrance last week. So, he scrolled to the resume. It had my law school credentials, my bar admission, my work history. But the name? Freya Langston. I didn't speak. My throat closed like a fist. She's impersonating me. Ronan nodded slowly. Down to the letter. I sank into the couch. How far does this go? She's been applying to other firms too. Looks like she created an email address similar to yours. Same format. Just swapped initials. She thought she could fake being a lawyer. She didn't fake it. She borrowed your life. The next morning, Ezra called again. "Miss Langston, we found something unusual. Your login credentials were used on several different networks. One IP matched your office. Another matches a personal Wi-Fi at an address owned by, let me guess, my parents." "Correct." He sounded cautious now. "It appears someone installed a keylogger on your work laptop. Likely through a flash drive or during a remote session." I rubbed my temples. They've been in my life, my bank, my job, my future. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I wasn't just fighting for my credit score. I was fighting for my name. That afternoon, I walked into HR. Ronan had prepared a brief for the managing partners. Evidence that my data had been compromised, that someone linked to me had used insider info to forge documents. They didn't ask many questions. One look at the screenshots and timelines, and they knew the risk. Ezra's bank had already flagged the accounts. Now it was my firm's turn. By the time I walked out of the boardroom, there were 2 investigations open. One internal, one federal. And still no one from my family had apologized. Just silence. And one text from Freya. "Why are you doing this? You're going to ruin us." I stared at it for a long time before replying. You already did. That night, Ronan and I hit the whiteboard again. Okay, he said, we've traced the fraudulent loans, the mortgages, the fake job apps, but there's still a gap. What kind of gap? This, he pointed, all started 6 months ago. But look, activity tied to your accounts goes back further. 3 years, at least. 3? Yup. Small charges, tiny loans, weird investments. I think they were testing you, figuring out how far they could go before you noticed. I closed my eyes. Images flicked through my brain, mom slipping documents across a dinner table, dad handing me forms to sign, Freya hugging me, whispering, "You always take care of us." And I had. Until now. The final blow came a few days later. Ezra called one last time. We did a deep forensic analysis, he said. There's one more thing you need to see. He sent me a file, encrypted. When I opened it, I nearly dropped my laptop. It was a video, security footage from inside the bank. And there they were, Mom and Freya, sitting at Ezra's desk, smiling, laughing, signing my name in front of the notary, confident and casual, like it was theirs, like I didn't exist. My voice shook. They did it in person? Ezra answered softly. Yes. They even brought a letter claiming power of attorney. My stomach turned. They'd lied. They'd built an entire world around a forged identity and sold it to the bank with smiles and pearls and fake paperwork. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just hit record on my phone, pointed it at the screen, and saved the clip. Because next time they looked me in the eye and said, "We didn't mean to hurt you," I'd have the truth playing in high definition. I didn't show them the video right away. Not because I was holding back, but because I wanted to see if they'd lie to my face again, even when there was no escape left. It was late afternoon when I showed up at my parents' house unannounced. Not with fury, not even with a plan, just with quiet, the kind that rattles people more than yelling ever could. The door creaked open. My father answered, still in his golf polo, looking both relieved and wary. He stepped aside without a word. I walked past him like I belonged there, because once I did. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring sauce, like it was just another Sunday. Freya sat at the dining table with her phone face down, pretending she didn't hear my footsteps. They all looked up when I set my laptop on the table and clicked play. No intro, no warning, just the video. Them, at the bank, smiling, watching my mother sign my name while Freya laughed at something the banker said. The silence that followed, thick, sweaty. No one breathed. Mom was the first to crack. "That's not what it looks like," she whispered. I closed the laptop calmly. "It's exactly what it looks like." Freya's voice was sharp. "You've been spying on us?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. Spying? You mean like installing malware on my laptop? Using my identity to build your own financial fantasy? Dad cleared his throat. "We did what we had to do for Freya. She was drowning. And you thought dragging me under would help her float?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The next morning, I filed the fraud report. Ezra walked me through it line by line. Ronan reviewed every page. We attached the video, copies of the forged signatures, the timeline of account activity, and a full list of compromised assets. It felt like signing a severance agreement with my past. A clean break, signed and notarized. The bank froze the accounts that afternoon. By evening, I got the first angry text from my father. "This is your family you're throwing away." I didn't respond. Instead, I updated HR at my firm. The internal review confirmed that someone had used my access credentials to log in remotely from an unfamiliar IP. They issued a public statement to the compliance board and offered me extended leave. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. It hit me then, not just the betrayal, but the years I'd spent assuming the best. The little lies they told, the secrets that slid past me, because I trusted them more than I trusted my own instincts. That was over now. The next day, Freya showed up at my apartment. No call, no warning, just her standing in the hall, makeup smudged, mascara tracks down her cheeks. I opened the door slowly. She didn't speak at first, just stared. "Please," she said finally. "Can I come in?" I didn't move. Why? Because I need you to hear my side, not an apology. Not the truth. Her version of the damage. I stepped back and let her in, not because I owed her anything, but because I wanted to look her in the eyes when she said the next lie. She didn't sit. She walked around the room like it was familiar, like we were still sisters who shared secrets and old playlists and late-night phone calls. Then she turned to me. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad. You forged my name. You pretended to be me. You applied for jobs using my credentials." She flinched. I panicked. I thought if I just got one foot in the door, I could make enough to pay it all off. "You thought you could fake being a lawyer?" "No," she said quietly. "I thought I could become one." I blinked. "Wait, what?" I applied to online law programs, took mock LSATs, practiced writing briefs using your old college notes. She looked almost proud. "You were always the smart one," she added. I just thought, maybe I could finally be worth something too. My stomach turned. "All you had to do was ask for help, Freya. I've always helped you. But you didn't ask. You stole." Tears welled up again. I didn't want to be the failure anymore. "Then stop acting like one." That landed hard. She took a shaky breath. "Mom and Dad didn't think you'd notice." I stared. "What?" "They thought you'd be too busy. That you'd understand if you found out." Understand. The word hit like a slap. "Get out." She blinked. "What?" I said, "Get out." I spent the next few days in Ronan's office as we built the next phase damage control. We filed identity theft reports with the FTC, disputed every account, placed fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus, froze my credit entirely. Then came the legal filings. A cease and desist against my parents, one against Freya, drafted so tightly that even whispering my name in a financial institution would flag them in contempt. We weren't playing nice anymore. A week later, the fallout began. Mom called twice. Left voicemails that swung from tearful guilt to full-blown denial. Dad sent an email that read more like a manifesto than a message. Long paragraphs about loyalty, legacy, and how families sometimes bend the rules for each other. I forwarded it to Ronan with a single comment. "Is this an admission of guilt?" He replied, "Absolutely." Framed in self-pity, but useful. Then Ezra called. "I wanted you to know," he said. "We just froze a shadow account linked to your investment profile." My pulse skipped. "How shadow?" "Unlisted. No correspondence. Hidden under a shell company, Dovecrest Holdings." "That's not mine." "I didn't think so." "But the beneficiary listed? Your father." My mouth went dry. Over $180,000 passed through it in the last year, all traceable back to loan disbursements under your name. It just kept coming. That night, Ronan showed up with Chinese food and a printout. "You need to see this." He laid out a credit report. "It's not just your identity," he said. "They've been using Dovecrest Holdings to apply for business grants, federal ones." My jaw clenched. "That's fraud on a federal level." "Exactly. And if we report this, they won't just be sued," I said. "They'll be investigated, prosecuted." Ronan nodded slowly. "And likely convicted." I looked at the folder, at the weight of every decision, every lie, every justification they'd whispered into each other's ears while telling me nothing. "This is it," I said. "We take it to the top." Ronan raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" I nodded. "No more protecting people who used me as collateral." By the time we built the final packet for the authorities, I didn't feel angry anymore, not because I'd forgiven them, far from it, but because the anger had burned through me like a firestorm, and what was left felt cleaner, sharper, cold like steel, stillness after the flame. I walked into the district attorney's office with 2 copies of everything digital and physical. Ronan had arranged a meeting with the white-collar crimes division. He came with me, sat beside me, didn't speak unless I needed him to. There were 3 people in the room, one read through the files, one ask questions, and the third the one who didn't say much at all, just watched me. Every word, every expression. By the time I finished explaining, the quiet one leaned forward. "Miss Langston will be pursuing this further. You understand that if this proceeds, your family could be indicted." I nodded once. "I'm aware." "You're certain you want this?" I took a slow breath. "No, but I need it." There was a long silence, then a quiet, firm response. "Understood." The next 48 hours were a blur. Investigators contacted the bank, my firm, the credit bureaus. A federal financial task force was looped in after the grant fraud came to light. Every lead we uncovered pointed to deeper roots: money laundering through shell companies, identity manipulation, misuse federal funds. It was no longer a family issue. It was criminal. The system they'd built was collapsing, and they knew it. On the third day, Mom showed up at my office. Not a call, not an email. Just her walking in, looking tired and older than I'd ever seen her. My assistant tried to stop her, but I waved it off. I needed to see her. Needed to hear whatever excuse she'd brought with her. She sat down across from me, folded her hands in her lap like a schoolgirl waiting to be scolded. "I just want to talk," she said quietly. I let the silence stretch between us until it hurt. She finally looked up. I didn't think it would go this far. I tilted my head. Didn't think or didn't care. Her lips trembled. "You're my daughter, and you're the woman who stole my name and used it like a pawn chip. I thought I was protecting your sister, giving her a chance. At the expense of my life?" She flinched. Then came the tears. "Of course. I was scared," she said. She was falling apart. She didn't have anyone. She had all of you. "I didn't think you'd get hurt," she whispered. "You didn't think at all," I replied. Her gaze hardened, just for a second. That familiar flicker of guilt curdling into resentment. "You always had more," she said. "We thought you could handle it." That sentence that one said everything. "You didn't do this because you believed in me," I said, voice low. "You did it because you believed." I wouldn't fight back. She stood then, not angry, just hollow. "I still love you," she said. I looked her dead in the eye. "Then, you should have protected me the way I always protected Freya." She left without another word. That night, the story broke. A local news blog ran a piece titled, "Prominent Family Under Investigation for Identity Fraud and Federal Financial Crimes." No names yet, but enough detail to send a shockwave through our neighborhood. By morning, I had 3 voicemails from old teachers, 2 from colleagues, 1 from Freya. I didn't listen to hers. Not because I didn't care what she had to say, but because I already knew what it would be. I didn't mean to. I didn't know. I didn't think it would go this far. Same melody, different day. Then the police showed up at my parents' house. Neighbors said they saw Mom being escorted out in tears and Dad refusing to come quietly. Freya wasn't there. She'd already moved into a short-term rental after her lease fell through. Turns out the condo was under my name too. She hadn't paid rent in 3 months. Ezra called shortly after. "They tried to pull money from an account we hadn't frozen yet," he said. "Over $90,000. And we stopped it. They're locked out." Good. Because I was tired of them thinking they still had control. A week later, I was called to testify in the preliminary hearing. I walked into the courthouse in a Navy suit, no makeup, hair pulled back. Just me. Not the daughter, not the sister, not the protector. Just Isla. Ronan waited outside, his expression unreadable. He didn't say much, just squeezed my shoulder before I entered the chamber. Inside, I saw them, my parents sitting in front of their attorneys, looking diminished. Smaller, like people caught in their own web. They didn't look at me. Freya wasn't there. When I took the stand, the day asked simple questions. I answered them the same way. Calm, direct, honest. No embellishments, no dramatics. Just the truth. And sometimes, truth is enough to break a person more than any insult could. Afterward, I walked out into the cold. Winter had arrived without asking, just like everything else this year. Ronan handed me coffee. "You did good." I nodded. "I saw your dad glaring," he added. "He can glare all he wants," I said. "It won't change the facts." Then my phone buzzed. A message from Freya. "You really hate us that much?" No hello. No I'm sorry. Just that. I stared at the screen. Typed. Deleted. Typed again. Then sent one line. "I don't hate you. I just love myself enough not to let you hurt me anymore." By the end of the week, the charges were formalized. Wire fraud, identity theft, misuse of federal funds, bank fraud, perjury, and more were still being investigated. Their attorney tried to propose a deal. The DA rejected it. There were too many victims now, names I didn't even know. Elderly friends my parents had convinced to invest in family ventures. People they'd charmed, leveraged, and quietly gutted. Their crimes weren't just about me anymore. They were about all of us. I got a letter in the mail 2 days later. Handwritten. From Freya. The handwriting looked like mine. Of course it did. She'd studied it for months. Inside was a mess of crossed-out lines and rewritten sentences. I never wanted this. I just wanted to be someone. I thought if I could build something like you, they'd love me the same. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say. I stared at the paper for a long time, then folded it once, slipped it into a drawer, didn't throw it away, didn't respond, just put it somewhere it couldn't hurt me anymore. The courthouse smelled like cold marble and fear. You'd never expect that from a place designed for justice, but it clung to the walls. People brought their secrets here, their regrets, their shame. Some of us came to find closure, others came to run from it. The morning of the trial, I stood outside courtroom 3B watching the people file in. Some were reporters, some were victims. A few were family friends who probably came hoping the gossip wasn't true. I didn't feel nervous. I felt clear, like the kind of cold that wakes you up, not the kind that makes you shiver. Ronan handed me a folder. "Last chance to back out," he said gently. I met his eyes. "This is me stepping in, not backing out." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're stronger than they ever expected." I gave a small nod. I was always strong. They just hoped I'd stay silent. Then the bailiff opened the doors. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. A low hum of whispers, shifting papers, camera shutters clicking quietly in the hallway. My parents sat across the aisle at the defense table, dressed like people trying to look smaller. Dad's suit was too big. Mom's blouse looked like it hadn't been ironed. They both avoided my gaze. Freya sat one row behind them, not with them, alone. She looked thinner, her hair darker, as if she thought hiding behind a new version of herself might change the past. It didn't. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecution didn't need theatrics. They had evidence, documents, video footage, testimonies, dates, and dollar signs and digital trails. The defense leaned into emotion. They painted my parents as desperate caretakers trying to save their struggling daughter, said the forgery was an accident, that I had previously expressed willingness to support Freya, and that miscommunication led to assumptions. I nearly laughed in my seat, but I didn't. I waited. When they called me to the stand, the courtroom fell quiet. I stepped up, swore in, sat down. The microphone caught my breath before I spoke. The prosecutor started gently. "Miss Langston, when did you first realize your identity had been compromised?" I looked straight ahead. October 17th. I got a call from a bank manager about a mortgage I didn't know existed. That call changed everything. Why? Because it wasn't just about the house. It was about my entire life being used without my consent. He walked me through the timeline, the forged signatures, the shadow accounts, the stolen credit lines, and then the video. He played it for the jury. The clip of my mother signing my name at the bank, while Freya smiled beside her. The silence in the room was heavy as it ended. Then he asked the question I'd been preparing for. What did it feel like to see that? I paused, not for effect, just to steady my voice. It felt like betrayal dressed as love. The jury held still. So did I. The defense took their turn. My father's lawyer tried to poke holes, asked if I had ever co-signed anything for Freya in the past, if I had ever given verbal consent for financial matters. No, I said. He asked if I was angry. Yes. Angry enough to exaggerate your family's actions? I leaned forward. I'm angry because they risked my career, my safety, and my future. But I don't need to exaggerate anything. The evidence speaks for itself. He shifted in his seat, tried one last swing. You never noticed your identity was being used for 3 years. Isn't it possible that deep down you knew and didn't care? I stared him down. No, I trusted them. That was my only mistake. Later that afternoon, Freya was called to testify. She walked to the stand slowly, glancing at me once, then looking away. Her lawyer asked basic questions about the loans, the credit cards, the job applications she submitted under my credentials. She admitted to all of it, said she was overwhelmed, that she felt like a failure, that she just wanted to be someone. Her voice shook. Her hands did too. But there was no apology in her testimony, only regret for getting caught. When cross-examined, she cried. The courtroom gave her space for it. I didn't, because I remembered the silence, the lies, The shopping trips and first-class flights while my name held the debt. I remembered every time she said nothing while I unraveled. She left the stand, looking smaller than she'd ever looked. But not sorry, just exposed. The prosecution closed with quiet precision. They talked about trust, about the sanctity of identity, about how some betrayals wear the face of love until you look closer. Then it was done. The jury was dismissed. We waited. Hours passed. I sat in the hallway alone, watching sunlight stretch across the floor. Ronan finally came back from grabbing coffee. "They're coming back in," he said. "So soon? Already?" I asked. He nodded. That usually means the evidence was overwhelming. We filed back into the courtroom. The jury foreman handed a slip of paper to the judge. I held my breath as he read. "On the charge of wire fraud, guilty. On the charge of identity theft, guilty. On the charge of federal grant misuse, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty." The list went on. Each word landed like a slow, final drumbeat. When it ended, the courtroom remained still. No cheers, no cries, just the sound of everything falling apart quietly, but completely. My parents didn't look at me as they were led away. They kept their eyes forward, as if the shame weighed too much to lift their heads. Freya stood up slowly, tried to say something. I turned before she could. I didn't need more words. I'd already heard everything that mattered and more than enough of what didn't. Outside, it was snowing. Not heavy, but steady. Like the world was trying to cover up what happened, one soft flake at a time. Ronan stood next to me, silent. We watched as the courthouse emptied behind us. Then he finally said, "You did it." "No," I said. "I just survived it." He nodded. "So, what comes next?" I looked out into the quiet street. The world was still turning, still asking questions I didn't know how to answer yet. But I had one answer now. I rebuild. From here, with clean hands and a name that's mine again. It's strange how quiet life becomes when the noise fades. The courtroom is behind me now. The lawyers, the files, the statements, the weight, it's all back in its folders. The headlines moved on, just like people do. But I'm still here, still learning how to breathe in a world that feels new but carries the same sky. 2 weeks after the verdict, I moved. Not far. Just across the river into a smaller place with wide windows and empty shelves. I wanted somewhere with silence. Somewhere I could hear my own thoughts again. The first night I slept there, I didn't dream. And for once, I didn't wake up afraid. They were sentenced a month later. Mom got 5 years. Dad got 7. Freya, who cooperated late but enough to make a difference, got 2 years probation and mandatory restitution. She walked out of that courtroom with a monitor on her ankle and a folder full of court dates. People say justice is clean, but it isn't. It's complicated, messy, wears too many faces. Sometimes it feels like punishment, other times like mercy, and sometimes it just feels like something that had to be done, even if you wished it didn't have to be you who did it. The judge offered me the last word. I stood up, cleared my throat, and said one sentence. "You had my name. Now you live with yours." Afterward, I stayed out of sight. I took leave from the firm. Traveled alone. A week in the desert. 4 days in a mountain cabin with no cell service. I sat in the quiet and listened to how my mind started filling the space again. Not with fear, but with my own voice. I thought about my childhood a lot. How they made me the strong one, the capable one, the one who never needed help. I thought about all the times that praise was really pressure. The way it became a leash. They didn't raise me to be loved, they raised me to be useful. That truth stung more than the betrayal, but naming it gave it less power. And slowly, I stopped flinching when I thought about my past. Because it was mine now, all of it, not just the broken parts. When I came back to the city, the firm offered me a position I hadn't expected. Director of Client Protection and Identity Law. Apparently, my experience was uniquely suited for the role. I laughed the first time I heard it. Then I accepted, because who better to teach others how to protect their name than someone who nearly lost hers? Ronan threw me a celebration dinner. Just the two of us. Dim lights, quiet music, no speeches, just shared silence and the kind of comfort that doesn't need explaining. "You know," he said over a forkful of pasta, "this city has no idea what to do with you now." I smiled. "That's the idea. I still get letters from victims my family defrauded. Not to blame me, but to thank me for exposing it, for giving them a voice. Some lost their retirement. One woman nearly lost her home. Another man lost faith in everyone around him until the court returned his savings and he watched my testimony on the local news. They call me brave, a fighter, a survivor. Sometimes I believe them. Sometimes I still feel like a woman who got caught in a story she never asked to write. But the truth is, I did write it. The moment I stood up, the moment I stopped letting silence speak for me. And I'm still writing it now. I haven't spoken to Freya since the trial. She sent one more letter, typed, signed, "I'm sorry. I really mean it this time. I'm working now. Minimum wage, but honest." Maybe that's a start. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted you to know I'm trying. I folded it once and kept it. Not because I forgive her, but because sometimes trying is worth something. Even if it never makes things right. I haven't replied. I don't know if I will. My parents are both in low-security facilities, separate states. I don't track their court-mandated restitution payments, but the firm does. A portion goes to the victims every month. I hear it's not much, but it's something. Their names still come up when I'm at industry events. People whisper, "Wonder what I must have done to deserve what happened." That's fine. Let them wonder. Because I know the truth, and I've learned that truth doesn't need an audience. It just needs room to stand. One morning, I woke up to a clear sky. I walked out onto the balcony of my little apartment. The sun was soft, and the city hadn't found its noise yet. I made coffee, stood barefoot on cool concrete, and looked out over a skyline that no longer scared me. I thought about what my therapist said during one of our early sessions. You don't heal by pretending it didn't happen. You heal by choosing what happens next. So here's what happens next. I teach people how to protect themselves. I speak at conferences. I help victims of identity theft rebuild legally and emotionally. I volunteer once a month with a women's legal shelter, not to erase what happened, but to give it purpose. I plant herbs on my windowsill. I read again. I sleep. I live. A few days ago, I walked by the old family house. It's empty now. For sale. The shutters are closed. The grass is dry. The porch still has the faint scratches in the wood where Freya and I used to race our bikes. I stood across the street for a moment. Not to mourn it. Not even to miss it. Just to see it for what it was. A place where I began but never belonged. Then I turned and walked away. Not because I had to, but because I could. Sometimes people ask me how I stayed so calm through it all. How I didn't fall apart. The truth is I did fall apart. Quietly. Off camera. In private moments when no one saw. But every time I broke, I built something stronger with what remained. Not bitterness, not revenge, just boundaries. And the understanding that survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new one. One you write with your own name, in your own handwriting. No copies, no forgeries, only truth. Story 2, how were you able to? I let out a yell. My voice reverberated over the deserted lot where our family's house used to be. There was only a heap of debris left. I saw Trent drinking his morning Starbucks while carelessly scrolling through his phone, while leaning against his BMW. He raised his head slowly. "Oh, hello, sweetie," he responded plainly. "Welcome back. I took care of a small house project for us while you were away, discovering yourself at the retreat." Tears pricked my eyes, and my hands shook. In an attempt to recover from the loss of my mother, I had recently returned from a healing retreat in the mountains. I arrived home to see this small project violated. "This was our home, Trent," I yelled. Without informing me, you destroyed our 25-year existence." With his massive frame creating a shadow, he pushed his phone into his suit pocket and headed in my direction. I stood my ground. Eliza. In any case, that old house was dilapidated, and we could definitely utilize the money from your inheritance to construct a lovely, contemporary house for ourselves. His tone changed from casual to growling. I saw that twinkle in his eyes, and it brought back memories of our wedding day. All I could see now was ruthless greed. My gift. Is that the point of this? I questioned incredulously. Our family home was devastated by you. My recollections of my mother. Only so you may take my money. Our funds. At least it ought to be. Trent's fury mounting, he shot back. I've had enough of you keeping things apart. The inheritance. Your savings got married. After all I've given you, including our children's college funds, the country club membership, and the fancy automobiles, I'm owed by you. With anger and heartache churning inside of me, I stood stunned. I used to adore this man with all of my heart, the father of Lucas and Sophie. He was now a stranger, driven by greed. You helped this family because it was your duty, not a favor, Trent. I was done by you. You wined and dined as I worked long hours in the classroom. Your buddies who are CEOs. Supported by a lifetime of repressed anger, my voice became louder. Although it appears that teaching second graders doesn't pay as much as it once did, one of us had to provide financial support for the family. He sneered. It was torn by that. I quickly swung my hand and gave him a forceful cheek smack. The boom pierced the void where cozy family memories used to reverberate. His face expressed disbelief for a time. Then a threatening smirk curved his lips. He raged and stomped back towards his ostentatious automobile, saying, "Eliza, you'll regret that. I am the inheritor of it. Regardless of how simple or complex you make this, I will receive what is rightfully mine." Among the wreckage of my life, I stood by myself. My mom is no longer with me. My house was destroyed. My spouse became into a monster. For years, I had prioritized my family's demands before my own. Trent, who believed he was entitled to a portion just for being my husband, now threatened to take away my last bit of security. Our living room was originally supported by a pile of gravel, and I slipped down on top of it. This man believed that I would submit like I usually did, so he felt he could intimidate me into doing so. Maybe the old Eliza gave in, desperate to maintain calm and terrified of war. However, losing my mother made me realize how fleeting life was. I would not give myself up anymore. I took hold of a piece of drywall that showed Lucas's height measurements as a youngster and vowed. Trent didn't realize how strong I was. If he thought I would give him everything. To keep myself and my kids safe, I would fight to the end. I marched forward, tears drying and determination stiffening. The rubble from the demolition crunched beneath my feet. Relics from the past. My future fuel. I wasn't broken, but I was bruised. I took out my phone and called the one person I knew would be able to assist, now focused on righteous rage. "Claire, hello. Eliza is here. I need the greatest divorce attorney in town. Therefore, I hope you still have cases on your plate." Over tepid coffee, I sit across from Claire and revisit long-suppressed memories. "Tell me about your past relationship with Trent, Eliza." Claire, who is known for being a bulldog in the courts, spoke softly. I closed my eyes and was taken back more than 20 years. At the age of 23, I was determined to begin my teaching career in 1998. Trent was a young, promising salesperson I met through friends and relatives. He instantly won me over with his charm and confidence. Within a year, we were married, and by the time I was 30, I had quit my career to devote myself full-time to raising our kids. Being a mother has always been my desire. Trent was ecstatic as well. He wanted me to stay at home and take care of the kids while he was out on business. I tried to be the ideal mother and wife. During Trent's absence, my parents were a huge assistance. Up until my father's untimely death 6 months ago, our family was tight and loving. After Dad's death, my mother's health subsequently rapidly deteriorated. "Eliza, I'm so sorry." Claire made a kind proposition. "You must have been going through a really trying moment." What was Trent's reaction? I let out a sigh, my temper growing as I mentally reenacted his indifferent actions. To be honest, Trent became colder and more agitated. He detested the fact that I was too busy tending to my mother's grief. He started making snide remarks about how much I played nurse. He offered no consolation at this time, and Claire scowled while making notes on her legal pad. Absolutely none. If anything, his harsh responses frequently made my sorrow worse. My thoughts strayed to a particularly painful experience. Mom and I were going through some old photo albums together, reliving old memories while laughing and sobbing. Trent unexpectedly returned home early from a business trip. "Has my house evolved into this? A patch for pity parties?" he had complained. "Trent," I reprimanded, "show some empathy. I simply want my wife back after Mom lost her 40-year marriage. This sad scenario must come to an end." He hurried to pour a scotch for himself. In an instant, Mom's brittle grin was disappeared, replaced by a resigned despair. We never again looked at the albums. Redirected to the present, I shook my head across from Claire. That's it. The guy I loved vanished, devoured by self-centeredness. Now, my voice trembled as I described Trent's unthinkable treachery and the vision of our destroyed house that was etched in my memory. Claire's face changed to one of righteous rage as she lunged closer. Eliza, don't worry, we'll hold him accountable. Under Claire's guidance, I uncovered bank records, paperwork, and Trent's scathing text messages over the course of the following weeks. She had no doubt that this evidence would result in a positive ruling. Claire's phone rang as we sat across from her at her large oak desk going over our strategy. Her eyebrows raised as she looked at the television. Talk about the devil then. Trent sent me a text. He claims he would want to meet and have a polite conversation. He must have learned that you were a lawyer, Claire chuckled coldly. As I imagined his plan, my stomach rumbled. I will never consent to a fictitious meeting, only to further his intimidation. Claire said, I know. A cheeky smile appeared on her face as she gazed thoughtfully at her phone's screen. It was obvious that the wheels were turning behind her perceptive eyes. Well, I have an idea, Eliza. With determination radiating from her, she leaned forward. What if we set a small trap for your cunning hubby with this text? She described a strategy to meet Trent under the pretense of good faith discussions, and I gave her a wary nod. However, we may have concrete evidence of Trent's threats and pressure if Claire surreptitiously recorded the exchange. When I finally held him accountable, my nervousness turned into a hesitant sense of relief. I glanced at Claire as we completed the last preparations for the secret rendezvous. I feel a new sense of confidence growing. Let's get this done. It's time to give that serpent what he truly deserves. Claire placed a steadying hand on my shoulder and grinned knowingly. It's showtime. My hands shook as I looked down at Trent's text, which confirmed our secret meeting. Location: a quiet downtown cafe, away from prying eyes. Even though Claire and I had come up with a solid strategy to reveal his dishonesty, I still had doubts. What insults were in store for me? To what extent would Trent exert pressure on me to give up my inheritance? I gritted my teeth and refused to let my worry control me. Now, my family's financial future and heritage are on the line. There was no room for failure. I chose a secluded corner booth with my back to the wall for complete visual coverage after arriving early at the unremarkable cafe. I placed my phone on the table, pressed record covertly, and then hid it beneath a napkin. Trent was set up for his impending outburst. I waited exactly as planned, 15 minutes late, as usual, now that I was sure our trap was established. Trent strolled in with a smug expression on his attractive but tough face. I gave the seat across from me a kind gesture. It's showtime. Isn't it mature of us to resolve this amicably, Eliza? With feigned seriousness, Trent volunteered. His attempt to act morally after abruptly destroying our family home almost made me puke. I just smiled flat instead. Yes, I believe it's critical that we discuss all of this in an honest and open manner. Trent moved, obviously uneasy at my nonplussed response. He probably anticipated a far more erratic reaction. As he had done so many times before, he could use manipulation to reroute. Excellent. Give him a chance to wriggle. The stillness was awkwardly broken by me. Trent, I'll go right to the point. Will you agree to reasonable conditions for the separation? At this point, I spoke in a stern yet calm tone. Trent gave a smirk. The kind exterior vanished in an instant. Divorce? The word was spit out by him. You must be kidding. I hope you don't expect me to consent to anything that could jeopardize my future financial security. Puts his future at risk. Normal Trent. All he cared about was money and prestige. Not family, of course. I continued calmly. I'm referring to dividing things fairly between us. We can be sensible adults, surely. Customers at other tables were startled as Trent banged his fist against the table, rattling the coffee mugs. No, Eliza, I won't consent to leaving without anything. Not after squandering my professional prime on this mediocre marriage. Bitterly, he jabbed. I'll make you regret ever threatening this divorce. Or you'll sign over your inheritance. And there it was. There is no longer any pretense about keeping our marriage or family intact. Trent revealed his one objective, obtaining what he believed he was due out of greed. But I sensed desperation behind his macho threats. His reputation and future wealth were on the line. Unless he could coerce me into giving in, he misjudged my determination this time. I spoke in a measured tone. Are you done with your tirade yet? Because I won't be forced to simply turn everything over by anything you say. I am completely ready for a court case. Trent's face flushed and his temper flared, but I could see the glint of fear in his stern expression. He hadn't anticipated my stoic confidence. You're a washed-up loser with entitlement, he sputtered. Everything you own was created by me, and I received this gratitude. You'll regret this, Eliza. No one steals my future with that. Trent shoved his chair back, forcefully, grabbed his jacket, and stormed out, steaming. My hands were trembling again, though, this time with relief and triumph. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking to stop the recording. Not only did I hold firm in my refusal to cave to his threats, I now had them all on tape, but no more hiding behind a charming veneer. The world would soon hear Trent's true venomous nature. For the first time in months, I broke into a grin. My tormentor's downfall was imminent, with Claire masterfully pulling legal strings and karma beginning to strike back at Trent for his deceit. I had set the stage for his reckoning. I almost pitied the poor guy. If he wasn't such a loathsome snake, willing to crush his own family for personal gain. Oh well, no mercy for the selfish fool. After settling my bill, I strode confidently out the door towards a future that shined brighter by the minute. My resolve was steeled for the fight ahead. Trent would bitterly regret the day he crossed me. I sighed, seeing the caller ID flash Trent for the third time that morning. After ignoring his barrage of petty texts, he was apparently resorting to voice messages to vent his frustration. My finger hovered over the decline button when a thought struck me. Trent's behavior had become increasingly erratic and abusive. Building a record of evidence couldn't hurt for the looming legal battle. I answered coolly, "What do you need, Trent?" His voice came through the speaker, shrill and commanding. "We need to discuss funeral arrangements for your mother. I already contacted my preferred venue and caterer and put a deposit down. I figured you'd be too emotional to handle planning." My breath caught in my throat. The audacity, after months of dismissing my grief, now assuming control and decision-making because I was too hysterical. I managed a terse retort. "Actually, Trent, I've already made preparations with Mom's church, and her closest friends are helping manage everything. But I'm confident your caterer returns deposits if you ask respectfully." I couldn't help the subtle stab signaling his arrogant preparation was not necessary or appreciated. An irritated sigh, followed by a lengthy silence, echoed from the phone when Trent spoke again. Any cloak of compassion had evaporated, revealing stinging scorn. "You always were impotent when it came to executive choices. I don't know why I'm astonished you'd leave the planning to a bunch of elderly church biddies just clinging to life themselves." I held my phone hard, fighting back a spew of outraged profanity. Breathalyzer, his ruthlessness, shocking as it may seem on film, may be important proof if he attempted saying I was the bitter, unreasonable one. Later, I reacted equally. "I'm planning this funeral in line with Mom's desires. Something you never cared to learn in 25 years together. She will be honored properly. Please, just let me handle this, Trent." Another uncomfortable moment ensued. I briefly believed he could have hung up, then followed a snarly, frightening response. "Finalizer, have your little, charming funeral tea gathering. I'm not going to stand around chit-chatting with those religious nuts, though. And I didn't take out any more money from my accounts." The line died. With a quivering exhale, I fell into our bed, which Trent had purposefully left without any bedding. He kept inventing new techniques for psychological torment. Even after he passed away, his brutality only increased over the following few days. He called it weak sentimentality as I went through Mom's stuff with encouraging friends. Trent's composed demeanor collapsed when our son Lucas arrived to assist with cleaning. Instead, than wasting time on pointless housekeeping, shouldn't you be concentrating on your exams? Our astonished son had been reprimanded by him. Rather than drama queen Eliza's tiresome emotional cleanse, all of stuff might have been just dragged off to Goodwill. Soon after, Lucas left the house, obviously hurt by his father's growing resentment. The thought of Trent and the kids becoming more and more separated hurt my heart. In his frenzied quest for wealth and prestige, he was prepared to break even these ties. On the day of Mom's burial, I dressed simply in a black gown, drab and exhausted, reflecting my erratic state of mind. With his morning drink in hand, Trent came out without a shirt. "Give my well wishes to the brainwashed Bible Brigade," he said sarcastically, reflecting the disdain he had showed his mother, even when she was still alive. Tears of heat pricked behind my eyes. I drove to the church, surrounded by genuine loved ones, and quietly slid out the door into the drizzled rain, the tears gushing, the raindrops hidden. There were several heartfelt moments during the funeral that honored Mom's giving nature. Most people were unaware of Trent's disappearance. He had deserted us during this holy time, and it hurt me. Trent's repeated indifference strengthened my resolve. Any last reluctance to proceed with cutting off ties disappeared. For years, his attempts to coerce me into complying had just confirmed my suspicions of abuse. Now that I had concrete evidence, I was resolved to defend myself legally. The rain stopped as we placed Mom's rose-adorned coffin next to Dad, creating shimmering pools on the grass of the cemetery. Beyond the storms of life, glimpses of bright blue sky were visible as the clouds broke. As I looked into the light, I knew that Trent's reckoning was coming up, and that Mom and Dad were joyfully supporting me. I finally felt in charge and empowered as I sat across from Claire, going over the most recent court filings. I now had the law on my side, even if Trent kept using his petty power tactics. "We have a solid case thanks to your testimony and supporting documentation." Claire gathered documents into a leather folio and reassured me. My confidence was driven by her blazing confidence. "Regarding the financial split, I have no doubt that the judge will decide in your favor, and you'll have no trouble getting full custody of your kids if you can provide documented evidence of emotional abuse." At the thought, I felt a flood of comfort. My top objective was to ensure Lucas and Sophie's safety during the tumultuous divorce. Trent's influence was now blatantly poisonous. They would feel more at ease if they were legally protected. "Claire, you've done a fantastic job. I made a serious offer. Without you negotiating the convoluted legal system, I genuinely doubt that I could have won this battle." Claire gave me copies of the paperwork with a modest grin. "I'm glad to contribute. But in all honesty, Eliza, what's winning here is your bravery and defiance of intimidation. Remember your inner power." Her comments struck a chord deep within me. For a long time, I had underestimated my fortitude, thinking Trent was the pioneer. Clarity now showed that I was the backbone, keeping things together in the background, and I should be fairly compensated for the sacrifices I made. Encouraged by this realization, I virtually flew out the doors of the legal office, eager to start the following step with fresh enthusiasm. When I noticed Trent smugly standing against the driver's side door of my Subaru, I stopped dead in my tracks and was unable to go inside. Once more, here we go. This is comfortable, isn't it? With a mocking gesture at the legal office, he made the offer. There's nothing like plotting with dubious attorneys, rather than attempting to keep our holy marital vows intact. I sneered at this distorted viewpoint. A good marriage, in my opinion, seldom consists of one person egotistically requesting assets and destroying things without permission. "Please relocate now. My automobile is being blocked by you." I grabbed for the handle and Trent stood defiantly in front of it. He has always had the benefit of intimidation due to his height. This time, I wasn't going to cower. "Not until you consented to a counseling mediation session," Trent insisted. "After you describe your situation to a professional, they will undoubtedly correct you on your entitlements." This attempt to quiet me by portraying my complaints as unreasonable and ignorant almost made me gag. I gave him a straightforward, assertive gaze. "I am fully aware of my entitlements. Without any coercion, Trent and I have a large, well-researched legal team protecting it. You won't deprive me of what I'm entitled to." His arrogant exterior momentarily wavered with uncertainty. My boldness obviously touched a chord. With his heavy coffee breath assaulting my senses, Trent regained his control and pressed closer. "Eliza, be careful. It appears that you have forgotten who has been providing for your well-being throughout the years. I'll turn you into dirt if you threaten my reputation." I didn't flinch, but his words made my arms stand on end. In tense quiet, we faced one another. Twins! Titans! I casually broke the tension at the top of a dangerous cliff. "Trent, feel free to threaten others if it gives you a sense of power. However, you stand to lose much more than I do here, as we both know." With fortitude concealing my quivering center, I looked into his black eyes without flinching. "This is the final time. Leave my car. My life is no longer dictated by you." A tense beat went by where anything may have happened. To my relief, Trent gave a sour look and moved away, complaining. Despite my internal trembling, I remained vigilantly composed, safely leaving without turning around. It was difficult to remain courageous while using intimidation techniques. However, I now understood the extent of my strength and that nothing was more powerful than a resolute woman standing up for her rights against a bully who was motivated by greed. "Go for it, Trent. Awaiting you is your reckoning." I looked from my watch to the massive courthouse doors and tapped my foot anxiously. The court date had finally arrived, more than a month after Claire and I had submitted the paperwork for financial separation. But Trent was late as usual, even though it was early. Anxiously having me wait was undoubtedly a weak attempt to reclaim control. He had no idea that I had achieved his end condition. I had the support of the law. After 15 boring minutes, Trent strode up the marble stairs, looking completely at home in his cocky, self-assured power suit. My grin was kind. "Well done. Come on, Trent. Should we move forward?" He nodded, but he scowled at my carefree attitude. They both gave brief nods. As we took our seats at the defendants' tables, I led the way into the large courtroom. With a nod of certainty, Claire came in shortly after, accompanied by our other legal assistants. As soon as the bailiff called the court into session, I held my breath and visualized winning. It was this. Trent's dishonesty will be judged on this day. Claire skillfully presented our evidence of emotional abuse and financial coercion, and the proceedings got off to a smooth start. Somberly, the judge listened. My eyes widened at Trent's very startling voicemails that defamed my reputation. Claire got it from me. She had constructed an absolutely indisputable case. The judge, looking severely over spectacles in front of the extensive evidence presented, cleared her throat after what seemed like a lifetime. "I hereby approve the request to dissolve the joint finances. Eliza, the plaintiff, will retain exclusive ownership of all assets and inheritance." I almost passed out with relief and victory. I turned to look to my right and saw Trent's face flush. Since Sophie's awful twos tantrums, I hadn't seen. He spat incoherently, straining to speak up, veins bulging from his neck. He was silenced by the powerful pounding of the gavel. Sweet triumph. I'm also giving Eliza complete legal and physical custody of both minor children in light of the documented mental abuse. At this, the judge went on sternly. Pens flew everywhere as Trent banged his hands violently on the desk. "This is crazy," he bellowed. "Flying spittle. I'm entitled to that money." "Eliza, you can't steal my children either." Prior to the bailiff's response, Trent shoved the defendant's table violently, sending it falling onto its side. He glared at me while yelling allegations as security held him back rather than confront him. As he was pulled out, screaming and kicking, I just collected my things in a calm manner. Among strained security personnel, he said, "You've made a grave mistake. Eliza, I'll reclaim what's rightfully mine. It's not over yet." As I confidently smiled and marched out to see Claire, his enduring threats reverberated down the marbled corridor. "Eliza, congratulations." As we passed the towering columns and into the sunshine, Claire smiled. "You're a very rich single lady today," and Trent's hysteria undoubtedly hurt his case before the judge. Excellent work. I exhaled deeply while keeping my cool, feeling as though years of despair and anguish were melting away. Sincerely, thank you. In many respects, I couldn't have handled this without your advice. I laughed. After exchanging relieved hugs, Claire left to take care of the just-released workload. In the meanwhile, I finally felt like the owner of my Subaru as I climbed into the driver's seat. Despite Trent's frantic warnings, I remained calm. His outburst of anger was ineffective against the legal system, which permanently protected my rights. The powerful gavel of truth destroyed any influence he could have had over me. Feeling rejuvenated, I turned the ignition key. The formerly stressed vehicle was infused with energy. For too long, Trent had controlled my life, but now that his irrationally domineering hands were off the wheel, I excitedly continued down the broad road toward freedom. That creme brulee was delicious, Mom. After our festive supper at the fancy French cafe, Lucas smiled and leaned back happily. Without a doubt, we must return here. With Trent now out of the picture, I grinned at my son, who was home for a little respite before summer internships kicked in. The tension had dissipated. From the other side of the table, Sophie gave me a tender grip on the hand. Mom, I'm extremely proud of you for defying your father. You deserve that court victory, she said earnestly. I was so grateful to be able to spend time with my kids again, without worrying about heartless remarks ruining special times. Lucas abruptly grabbed my arm as we were walking outside the restaurant and gestured to the pub next door. Trent sat half-slumped on a seat, gazing at CNN as it blared forecasts of an impending recession. His disheveled appearance betrayed a shattered man even from a distance. Sophie's hand was tight on my shoulder. Mom, let's go, she softly prodded. I stopped and watched as my once powerful opponent was reduced to a drunken shell of resentment. Like the remnants of our destroyed house, his reputation and legacy seemed to be in ruins. After his court outburst made news, he was ostracized by investors and high-level executives. It was rumored that his assets had also suffered greatly after the most recent stock market meltdown. His demise was only exacerbated by the community's anger. Lucas mumbled, "Karma's a beast, a Trent." The sight of his father's unkempt appearance still caused pain to simmer behind the fury in Lucas's eyes. As they proceeded to get an Uber, Sophie reassuringly put her arm around his. I remained still, staring at the fallout from Trent's avarice and conceit. Claire was correct. By refusing to make a compromise, he stood to lose considerably more than I did. All of the cunning plans and psychopathic threats had now been brutally exposed. The hardships humbled me. Even the titans who are most proud. Even while I was still righteously angry with Trent, seeing him destroy himself brought back some sympathy. Maybe if he showed genuine regret and got treatment for the underlying problems that were causing his selfish outlook. Trent looked up blearily from his glass, interrupting my empathetic thoughts. When he saw me, his bloodshot eyes showed anger. With a contorted grin, he stood up unsteadily and stumbled over. "Have you come to gloat?" His whiskey breath assaulted my senses as he mumbled, "Victor, little Miss Virtuous." Trent stumbled, but his words were sharpened by malice. I met his vacuous look with composure. "Trent, no. After supper with our children, we're just going home. In fact, I sincerely hope you'll receive the assistance you require before I'm done." Trent let off a tirade filled with spittle. "Don't waste your sanctimonious words. Eliza, you are to blame for this. I was threatened by your small-time retaliation, impoverished and hated." He swayed violently, nearer. "Your self-centered wrath cost me everything." Perceiving the altercation intensifying, I took a measured step back and motioned for help from the approaching bartender. It was obvious that Trent's drunken fury was beyond reason. He went on with his insane outburst, drawing surprised attention from onlookers. "Eliza, take note. I'll get right with you. Your little parade of celebration is over." The bartender grabbed him as he rushed at me. In horror, I hurried back to where Lucas and Sophie were standing. In response to reports of the incident, police sirens sounded from down the street. "Come on, let's get home." I pushed, guiding my frightened kids away from the terrifying spectacle. I turned to see Trent being thrown into a police car and yelling about retribution while intoxicated as they drove off. Despite his warnings and driven by avarice, the revenge Trent had poisoned Lee to plot was now his own downfall. I felt more sympathy than terror as I watched him deteriorate, insane, ill, and with police lights flashing. The bitter, damaged guy. It had been a year since that turbulent night, when Trent had fallen apart totally. Between jail time and court-mandated treatment, his drunken threats continued for months. However, it was reported that he had ultimately agreed to a light term in an upstate facility that focuses on financial difficulties and anger management. I started thinking about how to rebuild when Trent's toxicity stopped contaminating my house, beginning with repairing the actual basis he had ruthlessly destroyed. On a Saturday morning that was pleasantly mild, together with Lucas and Sophie, I stood on the empty lot where our family home used to be, grinning, dependable for many years. Unhaunted by lingering darkness, Claire took pictures of the hopeful moment as we started building a new home. Sophie squeezed my shoulder and said, "Mom, I'm so proud of you." For us all, this is a new beginning. As Lucas and I spoke about possible layouts, I looked around the area that was bustling with construction workers moving timber. More than bricks and mortar had been smashed by Trent's destructive deconstruction, but I would rise strong from the ruins and create new havens for my kids, free from suffocating shadows. Over the course of the next year, each golden beam was destroyed and brick mortared into place as the physical reconstruction moved forward in concert with the inward mending. I could feel our spirits healing too. The scars left by Trent's devastation would soon be more scar tissue than an open wound. On a cool fall afternoon, I got together with family and friends to celebrate the completed project, a stunning modern farmhouse that combines elegant improvements with historical charm. College pals were invited by Sophie and Lucas. As caterers passed champagne to celebrate, loving family members filled the house with contagious laughter. I stopped to look at the pictures on the mantel of the fireplace. Pictures of my parents grinned down, beaming with love and brightness that never faded. Despite their departure from this world, looking around at those who were there, more faces that were absent sprang out uncomfortably. Trent's parents were completely in line with their son, displaying their genuine selves. Despite evidence that implicates him, Trent meanwhile sat alone, wallowing, still too arrogant to accept responsibility. Their self-inflicted suffering was sufficient retribution. Occasionally, melancholy flared up again, longing for Trent's former self before ambition took over. But by looking ahead, I was able to rediscover the pleasures of daily living, rather than focusing on unhealthy partnerships. Sophie later joined me on the front porch, looking up at constellations twinkling. Hopefully, after everyone had left with warm housewarming flowers and heartfelt congratulations. The thoughtful stillness was broken by her. Today, Dad wrote me a short note from the rehab facility. He seems to be finally reflecting more on the repercussions of his behavior thanks to extensive counseling. I nodded, despite my doubts about genuine change from short-term treatment. That is encouraging. However, real transformation takes time. I gave Sophie a tighter embrace. But right here, among individuals who are dedicated to raising us up, are the most important ties to strengthen. Through tears that glittered in the moonlight, Sophie's strength and sensitivity allowed her to grin brilliantly. It was my best co-creation. She would continue cycles of kindness rather than hate. Sitting in contemplative stillness, we meticulously crafted salvation from wreckage while connecting to energies. Even if there were still wounds, Trent's corrosion had only strengthened my fortitude. Future flowers, desperate to continue blooming, were only nourished by his gloom.